sociological data, the General Social Survey, or GSS.
Right, the gold standard. And we're looking specifically at marital infidelity.
And if you just look at the big picture, you see this number that's been around forever.
You do. It's this persistent benchmark. Roughly 20% of married men and about 13% of married women say they've had an extramarital relationship at some point. A clear gap.
But our mission today is to show you that that 7-point gap is, well, it's not the real story. It's actually incredibly volatile.
It shifts wildly depending on how you slice the data.
And this is where it gets really counterintuitive. When you look at the youngest married adults, 18 to 29-year-olds, that gender gap just vanishes.
It pretty much disappears. In fact, women report slightly higher rates, about 11% to the men's 10%.
So what's going on? It seems like age is the real driver here. The gap is almost entirely historical.
It is. It comes from the oldest cohorts. If you look at people aged 80 and over, the difference is massive.
How massive?
It peaks at an 18 percentage point difference. You've got 24% of men reporting infidelity versus only 6% of women.
Wow. That feels like a huge historical echo. But what's the thinking there? Is it a generational thing?
It's exactly that. It's what sociologists call the sexual revolution cohort effect.
Okay.
Essentially, generations that came of age in the 40s and 50s just had characteristically different norms and behaviors around sex, and they carried those through their entire lives.
So the data from the younger group strongly suggests that we're heading for a convergence.
A statistical equalization, yeah. As this younger post-gender gap group gets older, the overall numbers are very likely to even out.
Okay, so if the aggregate gap is mostly a historical artifact, what about the why? For the people who are cheating now, what's driving them? The data seems to suggest men and women are operating on totally different wavelengths.
They really are. The motivations diverge sharply. For men, the primary reason given is overwhelmingly just sexual desire.
What's the number on that?
It's about 44% of cheating men. For women, that number is tiny, only 11%.
So for women, it's something else. It's more correlated with an emotional need, I take it?
Exactly. Emotional fulfillment, intimacy, validation, things like that.
You know, we all just assume that an affair is this big red flag signaling a marriage is in deep trouble.
The classic sign of a deeply unhappy relationship.
Yeah. But the sources here throw a real wrench in that idea, don't they? What percentage of people said their marriage was actually happy when it happened?
This number is always surprising. 56% of the men and 34% of the women who cheated described their marriage as happy at the time.
So it's not just about a bad marriage, it points to something else. Individual psychology, or maybe just opportunity.
Right. And it also points to some really interesting socioeconomic drivers.
Yeah, you pointed this one out to me, the idea that economic dependence can increase cheating. Wait, that sounds completely backward?
I know, it does. But the data shows that, particularly for men, being financially dependent on a spouse correlates with a higher likelihood of infidelity.
Why? What's the theory?
The theory is that it can act as a kind of status correction, a behavioral mechanism to compensate for a perceived loss of power or masculinity within the household.
That's fascinating. Before we wrap up, let's just briefly step outside the US, because you mentioned how culture can actually formalize all of this.
Yes, if you want to see how law defines betrayal, look at the Sai, or temporary marriage, in Iran.
And what is that exactly?
It's a contractual fixed-term marriage that basically functions as a legal loophole for married men to have sanctioned sexual relationships, often without their first wife even knowing. It writes gender disparity right into the law.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together for you. The big takeaway here is that the old 20 versus 13% gap is really a ghost of the past. Younger generations are already at parity.
And at the individual level, the motivations are split almost cleanly along gender lines, sex versus emotion. And these surprising internal dynamics, like who runs the money, play a huge role.
So here's the final thought to leave you with. The real challenge for the future is measurement.
It absolutely is. With the rise of digital platforms, you have emotional affairs, online relationships, things that are much harder to define.
So if we're going to accurately track this gender convergence that the data predicts...
We have to get much better at standardizing what infidelity even means in the 21st century.
Right.
That's the next frontier.